So welcome everybody. I'm Ravina Agarwal, and I'm the director of the Columbia Global Centers Mumbai, which is one of the nine centers that Columbia University has initiated in different parts of the world, with the aim of knowledge sharing and building partnerships of global experts to address some of the most pressing challenges that we face. Urban India, of course, faces multiple challenges which affect the quality of our lives and work. And during these last 10 months, we've really had to deal with the pandemic. It's been a long and hard journey, especially for small businesses and startups in India. But India's startup ecosystem, which is the world's third largest ecosystem, while receiving setbacks for sure, has proven enduring and even thrived during this time of crisis. Now more than ever, beyond tests and vaccines, we need those innovative products and services to help build citywide resilience. Innovation can come in many forms: hardware, data analytics, collaborative software, etc. Responsible innovation, though, is one that specifically benefits society and works towards solving its challenges, thus incorporating sustainability in terms of managing natural resources responsibly and efficiently, so that our environment is sustainable, and safety in terms of health and security of our citizens as we share this urban habitat, which can prove to be very challenging. So, sustainability and safety in the way we work or travel or consume resources in the workplace is very important. The Urban Works Challenge 2020-2021 is a call to all those techies and entrepreneurs who have designed solutions for cities in crisis. It's the third year of the challenge, and we've had two very successful years, and we are really delighted to have two of our past winners join us, Kanish Agarwal from Agua and Prashant Chandrasekaran from Valet Easy. We also welcome Amrita Chaudhary from Gaia. My colleagues Sanchit Ware and Brenda Marbanyang and I look forward to working with the exciting startups this year as well. And so hopefully a lot of you will apply. In return, we are happy to offer financial support and world-class mentorship from Columbia University's Fu Foundation School of Engineering. We are grateful, deeply grateful to the RMZ Foundation for giving us this opportunity and supporting this initiative, and our wonderful Urban Works Advisory Committee members, Pirocha Godrej, Vaishali Sinha, Sharad Sanghi, Shom Hinduja, and Swati Salgaonkar. I invite you to join us to make 2021 a year of responsible innovation. And I turn it over to Sanchit Ware, who will introduce our moderator, Swati Salgaonkar.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. We have today Ms. Swati Salgaonkar. She's the director of the Wimson Group, and she's also an alumnus of Columbia University. She's a member of the Goa State Council of the Confederation of Indian Industry, and she's also the co-chair of the CII Startups and Innovation Committee for the Western region, as well as a member of the National Committee on Mining and the National Startups Council. She has been appointed on a special task force constituted by the Department of Industries of the Government of Goa to review the Goa Investment Promotion Act, as well as a joint consultative group for framing the Goa State Entrepreneurship Policy. I would like to welcome Ms. Swati Salgaonkar.
Thank you, Sanchit, and thank you, Ravina, and good evening to all our viewers. I think, in the journey to economic prosperity and growth, Indian cities have been under tremendous stress, and the pandemic has made us acutely aware of an accelerated need to innovate through green technology. Urban transformation, to advance the quality of life of residents, I think is only possible through a culture of innovation and collaboration between all the stakeholders, including policymakers, academia, residents, corporate organizations, and of course, startups. And I think the Urban Works Challenge is really a path-breaking endeavor in the Indian context that looks at creating smart cities with the cornerstones of sustainability and resilience. And as part of this year's challenge, this is the first event that's going to look at technology-based solutions that reimagine Indian cities through the lens of environmental sensitivity and inclusive development. So our three panelists for today will share how sustainability and responsible innovation have influenced their entrepreneurship journey and the strategies that they've adopted to address challenges in a rapidly changing urban India. Our first panelist for the day is Amrita Chaudhary. She's the CEO of Gaia Smart Cities, which is an IoT and AI enterprise SaaS company providing operations and tech solutions for smart sites and smart cities. Our second panelist is Kanish Agarwal. He's co-founder and COO of Agua Wireless Systems, which uses IoT to enable smart water management in rural, urban, and industrial areas. And last but not least, our third panelist is Prashant Chandrasekharan, co-founder and COO of Valet Easy, an IoT and AI and machine learning enabled smart parking technology firm based out of Bangalore. And I'm looking forward to hearing, all their views on sustainable innovation for the next hour or so. And just to get started, before each of the panelists presents, I would just like to address a common question to all of them. If they could just share a little bit about their entrepreneurship journey thus far. What prompted you to look at urban tech or green tech, which is not a very popular choice in the Indian context. So it would be great if you could elaborate a little bit on that, and then also talk about, your current endeavors and current businesses through your presentation. So perhaps, Amrita, we could start with you.
Thanks, Swati. So to answer your question around our journey, we founded Gaia about 5 years back, and it was also the start of the Smart Cities mission at that point of time. And our team, our co-founding team, actually comes with background and experience in sort of wide-scale telecom and IT, in design, and looking at sort of challenges which are at a larger scale. So when we founded the company, and given the mood of the nation at the moment with the launch of so many different initiatives, actually what we wanted really to do was create a tech for good company and look at challenges which are wide area challenges. So when you're looking at either a citywide challenge, or you're looking at an organization which has a distributed presence, so it might be an enterprise or a government-related entity, or a city-related entity which has multiple locations, multiple staff, multiple equipment spread over a wider area, then you need to look at the problem in a very different way. So that really was the genesis of what we were doing. It's been a fantastic journey thus far, a lot of rich learnings and a lot of impact that I think we have been able to create. And just this year, we started out, we forayed into the US market as well, despite the lockdown and despite the pandemic. And we've managed to do something with, a significant impact, we feel, over there as well, and many more to happen. So I'll talk a little bit more about that through the presentation when we get into it.
Thanks so much, Amrita. I look forward to hearing, more about the exciting things you're doing at Gaia. Maybe Kanish, if you could go next and just talk a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey and your current, sort of initiatives within Agua.
Sure. So, hi, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Agua. So as we all know, India is facing a freshwater crisis. It is not something that is going to happen like 10 or 20 years in the future. It's happening today. Our borewells are drying up, the climate change has changed our rainfall patterns, the glaciers are melting. It's a bad situation everywhere. So this is why Agua started off as a mission-driven company. The whole mission is to start today when not a lot of people are focusing on the solutions of these things, but yeah, we wanted to start early and solve the problem before it becomes so big that it can't be handled. And more importantly, we feel that people like us who have the tools, who have the technology, and who have the resources to solve these problems at the scale that it is required. If we don't do it, then who will? So yeah, that was the reason behind our starting this company. And talking about where we are at this stage, we started off in August of 2019. We have had reasonable traction over the last 2 years, and definitely the pandemic impacted some of our process flow, but then that also gave us new avenues. Right now, we are executing multiple projects in at village levels and at a city level as well, we're trying to enter into those segments as well. So there has been more openness in terms of adopting technology solutions to solve this crisis that we are all facing. So overall, we are heading in the right direction, I would say. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kanish. And that's a lovely thought. If we don't solve the problems, who will? I wish more, entrepreneurs would think like that. And moving to Prashant now, if you could just talk a little bit about your, journey as you founded and started Valley Easy and sort of where you are now.
Sure. Good evening and thanks for that. So Valley Easy was started by me and my co-founder Smith more than 4.5 years ago in 2016. And for me, actually, the motivation and inspiration to start Valley Easy came from my previous professional experience and some of the personal experiences I had. So professionally, I used to work at a firm called Intellicap Avishkar, which is a very large impact investing and social inclusive business firm. So a lot of my work there was actually focused on, I was actually doing two interesting projects, one with the Rockefeller Foundation and one with Bill and Melinda Gates, focusing on how do you build for-profit and sustainable sort of business models in urban infrastructure, mostly around water, sanitation, housing. And that sort of gave me a lot of introduction into the state of infrastructure within India and how do you sort of crack models over there. On the personal front, of course, it was slightly more interesting because the place where our office was located was in Goregaon in Mumbai, and we had a massive problem around parking. And it was a problem I personally faced every day because that was a time when I had gotten a new car and I was taking it to work. And then I saw that a lot of my colleagues had the same issue. And there was some interesting similarities I saw to the nature of the problem and the solution there that came from the work I was doing in water sanitation, which is, and I also figured that when it comes to parking, it's a problem that you can apply a lot more traditional for-profit capital and solve, because when it comes to water sanitation, you need to find a completely blended model. And that sort of got me in that journey. And then obviously working with my co-founder was the idea that how do we find the right match between the technology capability that which he brought and the experience that I had in the domains that I had worked. Is kind of how we got started on the journey. So that's kind of where Valley Easy started off back then. So obviously it's been a very interesting journey for us. We've tried to stay true to the vision that ultimately when you want to solve problems like parking or any of the other solutions, you need to, I think the benefit of digital technology that you have today is that it allows you to reimagine the way you construct infrastructure in cities. And one of the principles that I worked around was how do you decentralize and distribute infrastructure and then find a way to manage it and use technology to sort of, you could say in a way, load balance the infrastructure. And that's something that came from the work I was doing in water sanitation. And we found that the same principle works quite well in the context of parking because all of these things have a certain pattern to the usage. And if you can manage and find a way to share resources, then you can actually find that you can use it in a more environmentally sustainable manner. And that makes more sense in the long run. So that's kind of how we really got started on it.
Thanks, Prashant. It's really interesting how, you had a practical problem and then how you managed to find synergies with the rest of your professional life, and your co-founder through this sort of lens of sustainability. And I look forward to talking more about that, as we progress in the event. Before we get to the rest of the questions, I'd like to request Amrita, to share her presentation and maybe just walk us through a little bit about what, the efforts that Gaia is making in the smart cities sphere.
Thanks, Swati. So as I started mentioning, we've been solving what we call wide area challenges. And when I say wide area, specifically, there is a lot of infrastructure as well as services which are given by various parties to citizens, both the city to the citizen as well as private sector players to the citizen. And these the delivery of these services and the delivery of the experience of these services is what we've been working on. So we started out with an IoT DNA, and we had our own the early innovation was all around IoT and data analytics around that. But we realized that that is not enough, and especially when you're looking at distributed infrastructure and distributed processes for the end goal of service delivery to citizens, it requires the orchestration of people and processes to ensure that there is service assurance, right? So we actually started stitching this together. So we have IoT, we have a whole lot of like an Internet of People, so a lot of people management, last mile workforce kind of management modules stitched into it, and a lot of Internet of Process, so a lot of what we call cognitive process automation and process management, data automation, digitalization kind of like elements also stitched into it, along with the IoT elements. So the challenge is that when you're looking at operations, when you're looking at, let's say, some of our clients are there in Swachh Bharat and sanitation management, and you're looking at managing facilities and infrastructure at the last mile, right? Or we have clients in railways where there's a lot of at least 70%, 75% of the high value trains are using our system and processes for onboard task management. So these are locations which are distributed nationally. You have people who are coming from not just the client team, but also from multiple third-party providers. So for example, in the case of Indian Railways, we have, while the board of Indian Railways wants to understand how operations are happening on a real-time basis on different trains like your Rajdhani, Shatabdis, and so on. It is actually managed on the ground through 75 depots, and each of these depots will have a few different third-party service providers and a collective staff of 18,000 managing these trains on a daily basis. So there's a lot of handoffs that happens. There's a lot of data that gets lost, and there is a lot of sort of a lag in terms of understanding how the entire system is performing, and hence there's a lot of inefficiency and cost that gets built into this entire process. So our whole area is to really interconnect operations intelligently, which means assets and equipment, people who operate those assets and equipment, the processes that are stitched together with people using and operating and performing different tasks and services, and the vendors as well, because often it's not just the staff of the enterprise that we are working with, but their third parties also who need to come onto a common platform. And then we give them a unified view of operational performance and help them improve, align a lot of long-term goals, performances. There's a lot of rich data analytics that they can use for both real-time management of the system as well as for systemic improvement over a period of time, right? So in terms of our clients, we have clients, as I mentioned, in Swachh Bharat is a client for smart sanitation. We've been doing a lot of work across 100+ cities. We have a lot of smart facilities because there's a lot of infrastructure, including energy metering, energy monitoring, distribution transformer level monitoring to know when there is outages, breakages, lag, loss of different types is what we monitor. And essentially all of that gets stitched together then into smart operations. And a lot of smart governance is what we do, because these are multi-stakeholder platforms that we have with hardware, software. So we have the enterprise and their third parties, and there's a lot of monitoring of service levels, monitoring of vendors, monitoring of contracts, and all of that happens. So our clients are government. We are working with a lot of cities, smart cities, and enterprises. And I think where we have been able to make a difference, not just in terms of the outcome that we deliver to our clients, but also in stitching together the idea and seeing that it needs to be sold at two levels, because these are ecosystem plays and these are really complex challenges where many stakeholders and many actors are there. So, for example, in the railways example or in Swachh Bharat example, there's a level of an advisory consultation and selling that we do at the national level. And then there is a lot of selling that happens both at the city level or at the enterprise vendor level, so that we are able to stitch together the solution and ensure that it scales up. So that is required. And the other interesting thing that we've realized over a period of time is that tech is not enough. And sometimes people on the ground, the people who have to use the technology to generate the data and the analytics, which is going to be useful for the board level people, are scared of technology. So change management and assurance of people is is a part of the process that needs to go hand in hand with tech. And then the other third part where we've been very conscious of is the design element. And not just the design of the hardware, but also the design of the interfaces and screens and so on, because it needs to be user-friendly at the last mile, at the frontline workforces, and it needs to be really rich enough for giving a lot of input and information and insights at the top level to the key clients. And very specifically for this particular, and one of the other things that has happened is that we've rapidly innovated. So for example, during COVID, during lockdown, some of our solutions which were running in hospitals for hospital operations, we were actually able to very quickly turn it around and use it for citywide emergency response management, which was deployed in Agra. And it was extremely well appreciated by different ministry bodies, by the Smart Cities Mission, NIUA, and so on. And then we were able to take that same technology to the US, and we've been working with some of the organizations which are involved in public service delivery to help orchestrate their processes and help automate their processes over there. So again, you realize that some of these challenges are common across the world, and the fears and the solutions are also transportable, right? And I mean, the fears that need to be allayed are also common. So, and specifically for this group of founders who might be listening in today, as Gaia, we've been a part of different cohorts. So we've been a part of ST Microelectronics, startup lab. We were the first company that they incubated in the world, around the world, and we were a part of their the Greater Noida facility. Our team has got immense amount of exposure, access to Maker Labs, a lot of their experts from around the world, from France, from Italy, they all engaged with us. So our product definition and our product capability got enhanced by many sharp and experienced minds from around the world. Similarly, we were a part of the Microsoft cohort. We were a part of their scale-up program, and then we were also the winners of their machine learning lab, which was a global thing that they did. And as part of both of these programs, again, we got an access to some of their best machine learning and AI analytics experts who worked with our team. So I would say that it's invaluable, the kind of exposure that we get as startups and the kind of facilities that we get access to through some of the accelerator programs and the incubator programs. So I would highly encourage everybody to apply, whoever is listening out there. So I think with that, I'll end my presentation, and if there is any questions, we'll handle it later. Thank you.
Thanks, Amrita. Thanks, Amrita. And I look forward to talking more about, a lot of the topics you've brought up. Maybe next I could just request Kanish to go ahead with his presentation.
So Agua is a line of IoT solutions aimed at enabling smart water management in urban, rural, and industrial setups. So the kind of problems that we're trying to tackle range from a consumer level. So at a consumer level, users are often billed not according to their actual usage, but according to the average usage of the whole facility. This is common in apartments and commercial buildings where there's a common pipeline. Then there's sewage treatment plants where the unhygienic conditions or the unsanitary conditions, that leads to employee turnovers as high as 40% in 2 months. And that also is an area which we are trying to tackle. Mismanagement of resources in facilities with multiple tanks, motors, valves. The manual management of these resources leads to supply side inefficiencies and wastages up to 15%. Lack of notification systems is where users are not alerted as and when they're going to run out of water. If we talk about city level problems, the most common ones that we have seen is non-revenue water. Non-revenue water is essentially leakages and theft in underground pipelines during the water distribution. Moreover, there is a problem of uneven distribution. Uneven distribution is where the entities towards the farther end of the pipeline receive less water than the entities towards the beginning of the, nearer to the source. So these are the problems that we are trying to tackle through our solutions. This is one of our solutions, the smart billing system. The smart billing system is essentially a smart water meter based system wherein we are tracking the accurate or the actual consumption of each individual user. And basis that we're generating the bills, Now, after installing these systems in apartments and commercial buildings, what we have seen is that there has been an overall reduction in the water consumption of the whole building by 35%. This primarily happens because the highest user now starts paying on his actual consumption, and he automatically cuts down his consumption. Moreover, because all the data is available to all users on a in real time on a mobile application, users are more cognizant of their usage, which leads to the further drop in consumption. The water level controller is essentially a pump automation tool, which automates the functioning of a water pump based on the supply and demand data in overhead tanks. This is essentially used to prevent tank overflows due to due to the motor running more than it is required. A quota-based or a demand-based distribution system is what we are trying to implement at a village and city level right now. So essentially what the system does is provide users water based on their actual need and not just random pressure-based delivery. Moreover, this system is very instrumental in tackling the problem of underground leakages and theft by pinpointing the exact source of leakage and theft due to the pressure drops that are observed using our hardware devices. The sewage treatment plant automation system is something that we piloted as a part of the UrbanWorks Innovation Challenge last year. Using this, the facility can reduce the manpower, provide real-time monitoring at a whole facility-wide level, and most importantly, there is centralized quality tracking. So centralized quality tracking ensures that the water which is processed from the sewage treatment plants can be redirected for reuse within the facility. And it also helps the facility comply with NGT PCB guidelines. So yeah, that was a brief about Agua. I would be happy to share, answer other questions that you might have.
Thanks, Kanish. Maybe before we get to the rest of the questions, I'd just like to request Prashant to go ahead with his presentation.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. Quick introduction about Valet-Easy. So what we focus on at Valet-Easy is eliminating everyday parking problems. And we do this by building tech that allows you to address the issues of poorly managed infrastructure. How do you deliver assured parking solutions for users? How do you manage parking lots better? And how do you address the issue of trust and security over a period of time? So this is, in a nutshell, what we look to do. In terms of the problem, I think the problem is a very familiar one. We all live in cities which are extremely congested and getting more congested as time goes. Space is a constraint and the number of vehicles is just going on increasing. So when we looked at this as a problem statement and said, what is there in the landscape that allows us to sort of resolve the state of the situation, what we realized is that if you want to bring any kind of technology, the most existing solutions that were there were extremely high cost and high capital intensive, which prevented a lot of digitization. Digitization basically gives us a benefit, which is that we get insight on what is the utilization of parking, and what are the available free assets, and then make them available to other users over a period of time. In effect, making parking a shared resource. This did not exist. There was no mechanism to make this integration happen. There were in global examples of app-based solutions which allowed you to sort of book parking spaces the way you book rooms in Airbnb. But that solution would not work in an Indian context because, I mean, if you didn't have computerization, there's no way to know what inventory is there. And users obviously had a problem because if you are getting out of your home to go to the market, or if you're going for a meeting with some clients, then you have no idea whether if you're going to take your vehicle, whether you're going to find a parking spot or not. And even if there's parking available, then you have no idea whether you will get it at the point in time when you need it. So clearly a very significant problem and a growing problem. So what you really needed in parking was a mechanism which allowed you to aggregate inventory and get visibility on inventory and all forms of inventory in a city. And if you could get a visibility of all forms of inventory in a city, then you can may use that data, process it, and provide insights that works for the owner of the property, the parking space, the end users who need to find parking, and even for the city, because the city gets a mechanism to address both traffic congestion and even pollution, because the lack of parking and the fact that most drivers drive around for 15-20 minutes trying to find a parking spot is both a loss of fuel and creates a lot of emissions, both of which are significant problems. Not to mention that most studies show that parking contributes almost 30% of all traffic congestion in cities. So this is really what we saw as the umbrella sort of solution that needs to be built out. And what we did here is that we built We built an IoT product which allows us to digitize all kinds of hardware that is used in the parking infrastructure. We moved this to cloud. So in effect, we were able to crash the cost of setting up parking systems, which means traditionally before we were doing this, most parking lots had very high cost solutions with a lot of cabling costs, civil work and all of that, which basically meant that only the largest malls and airports could use this. We sort of reconstructed the solution and brought it down to a cost point where you could literally run this if you had an independent house in your front garage. And then you can scale it up to run an airport or a very large railway station parking as well. So scalable, making it adaptable. And then how do you work with the data that you get in real time and build insights on top of that? And those insights will be useful to end users and also to the parking lot owner. So it helps him improve his utilization, make more money, and helps end users figure out where parking is available at any point in time in the city. So this is really the way we went about building the solutions. And we've been on this journey for about 4 years. A large part of the difficulty in parking is really figuring out how do you digitize parking. And parking, interestingly, does not come in one standard form. I mean, we all think that we go find a spot and we park. But the way you park in a railway station is very different from the way you park in a multiplex in terms of how traffic management works. And the way you park in an office is very different from if you were going to a mall. So each of these have nuances and you have to build solutions around that. So that's really what most of the products that we built really do. So obviously the end goal was you want to digitize, you want to automate, you want to make data visible. And obviously we had to cross a fair bit of learning curve in terms of getting the market educated and working in creating an ecosystem. COVID obviously had an impact in the sense that if people were not getting out, they weren't going to be parking a lot. So that obviously impacted all. That had a huge second order impact for us. But the interesting thing was also that it made it a lot more important for people to look at both digital and contactless solutions and adopt more automation than historically has happened in India. So that's a journey that we had already been on and got accelerated in the past year. And I think I've sort of articulated 3 ways in which we do that. One is using near field communication systems to run subscription models in, say, commercial or mixed use property. QR code based contactless check-ins, which work in malls. And the third one is interesting because the work we did with FASTag. So actually our journey, FASTag is a form of RFID technology, which is linked to a digital wallet. So you would have all by now be quite familiar with FASTag because every vehicle has to have one. But when we were initially part of the cohort at the program with Columbia and CoWorks, we had focused on building RFID-based solutions to address the problem of parking in offices and tech parks. And that got extended. We built that whole solution out. We sort of did POCs at the time. And then as we got out of the program, we actually started engaging with NPCI, figuring out how we can extend this to FASTag because every vehicle already had a tag. So it didn't make sense for us to get tags out. And that really worked very well because in November, December last year, 2020 is when we launched India's first contactless FASTag enabled parking for malls and pay park. And we're looking to scale that. So COVID had a very interesting impact on us in that sense. In terms of how we look at our solutions in the context of the city as a whole, what we're looking at is if we are able to digitize a large portion of the inventory in the city, and we're very focused not on running this solution in malls or just in large tech parks, but any property can turn this on. And the system is designed in a way that you can actually run it part of the time, which means you can run it 2 days of the week or a few hours of the day. And that basically means you have a lot of inventory, which is what you call transient inventory available only when you need it. And if you can connect all of this into a common system, you basically have parking when you need, you can access it when you require it, and you can integrate it into the wider transit system. And that makes it for a lot more sustainable mobility sort of solution for a city. And that's really the larger vision that we are following. So yeah, so I'll end there. That sort of summarizes the broader vision for the city that we are pursuing. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant. So maybe just to start off with, I just wanted to get all of your thoughts on the policy challenges that you face in India, because there's a high degree of collaboration with various government agencies when it comes to urban tech. And also, it's as startups, I think you have to navigate that whole system can be quite tricky. So if you could just talk a little bit about that, maybe Prashant, you could go first.
Sure. So we obviously realized that parking had a very significant government dimension when it comes to managing infrastructure. Now, parking is interesting because you obviously have in common inventory, which is very visible, and then you have a big problem around on-street parking, which is a problem only government can solve. But from an inventory and an asset perspective, you have a lot of private inventory as well. So from a business model perspective, you can solve it for both private and public, but the end goal should be how do I organize our streets better? So we actually pursued this through two routes. Initially, before we became part of the Columbia cohort, we were originally part of a program that was run by Omidyar Networks and Village Capital, which was called the Civic Tech Program, which was specifically focused on helping startups work with government agencies. And through that process, we actually ended up meeting with a lot of government officials, both at the central government and in the state, in Karnataka and at the local government level, trying to figure out how do we sort of present designs and roadmaps which can help them structure policy. And also obviously trying to figure out how does a startup fit in the scheme of participating in implementing the program, because shaping policy is one thing, but we're also a business. So we need to obviously be able to figure out a way to make money through the whole process. Now, one thing you very clearly realize is that anything you do with government has to be a long-term initiative. So if your business is solely dependent on government, then it's better to work in a context where there is policy which already exists for your business to do things that it needs to do. The second part is that you need to engage in policy, but you need to have a really long-term horizon in the context of a startup. When I say long-term, I mean 3 to 5 years, which is pretty long for a startup. The second thing that we did was that we were actually part of a group that was set up with DULT and a bunch of other mobility institutions in Bangalore. DULT is the Department of Urban Land Transport, which is based in Bangalore. And they are working around policy for parking and mobility. And we're actually participating in that working group to sort of make contributions in terms of how they should look at design. And interestingly, they have actually pursued that policy in a very sort of progressive manner. Now, we use that as a way to engage because it allows us to get our inputs in and shape the policy in a way that works. We understand that's longer term, but then it also helps us sort of figure out how we need to navigate our business model, keeping the developments in. So basically, you get a front side view of what's going on in the landscape. So that's kind of how we've looked at policy and approaching it in our business.
Thanks, Prashant. This is an interesting way of how you sort of, dealt with the various challenges. Amrita, if you're dealing with smart cities, you can't avoid dealing with the government. So how, what do you think the policy challenges have been for you, and, how have you been able to navigate those?
So I think I would echo some of what Prashant said, and I'll share our experiences. So we have also been extremely active both at the advocacy and the policy level. Our co-founders, my co-founders, have been sitting on different standards and bodies and institutes and think tanks and so on, which have been constituted by different ministries and departments. So at the BIS or at the MeitY, at the Smart City Mission, working groups and so on. So it's been a very integral part of it, and this obviously is a long-term perspective because you have to contribute, you have to write these white papers, you have to engage with stakeholders. So that's an essential part of operating in this domain, and it's also exciting as well because it gives you a wider perspective on what the challenges are and what is it that you're trying to solve. Now, that said, procurement in the government is always challenging, and there's a few different things that we've done where, one is that while there is a policy in many scenarios, both for smart cities or at the city level or at the state government level procurement to encourage startups, the the procurement policies or the actual procurement doesn't really follow that, right? So despite there is a gap between policy and action on that front. So we have gone to market with multiple other people who take our solutions and front end it. So these will be the larger system integrators. So these are channel partners in the front. We've done projects with KPMG, with Sterlite, with BSNL, with multiple other people who are who have the wherewithal to be the front end, and then they take our solutions to market. So that becomes a very valid point of access. I think the other thing that we've tried a few times, and I think sometimes it works and sometimes often it doesn't, but there's a lot of these challenges that come up, and some of these challenges require some sort of a partnership between industry and startup, along with a government organization and an academia partner. So sometimes it's been successful, but I'd say that most often, it doesn't actually work, and it's a lot of effort that goes and goes. I mean, it's a good learning experience, but from a profitability and revenue generation perspective, it's effort that doesn't lead to outcomes. Right? So we've now been very conscious after several of such things early on that we're very judicious in what we do and the efforts that we make and the kinds of partners we chase and the kinds of partners we don't chase, and so on. Right. And the third thing is that compliance sometimes actually works in our favor. So, I mean, especially if you look at time and temperature sensitive monitoring for foods, pharma, and related products, where my clients are in the private sector, but there is a strong regulatory requirement for certain things. So Amul, we're monitoring all of their warehouses nationally, DHL, all of the pharmaceutical products that they ship or manage at different warehouses nationally, we look at those. So again, in that case, it's not that the government is involved, but there is a compliance which actually makes it, the client purchase the solution a lot more. And I think the other thing that we've also realized is that while government gives us scale, and that scale is really unmatchable, there are also it's good to have a blend of enterprise and government clients, and we've really chased that a lot in the last couple of years, and now we are also trying to see started the global journey as well. So while we started out with this whole made in India, made for India, impact for India kind of a lens, we've actually ended up saying that okay, we need to be a little wider and broader than that, and survival is critical.
Thanks a lot for that, Amrita. Kanish, would you like to talk a little bit about the challenges you face? Because obviously water, and on some level you're looking at, I guess housing colonies and things like that, but there is an element of interface with the government as well. So if you could just talk a little bit about that, or policy challenges that you've faced.
Right. So actually, the biggest policy challenge for us is that water is still not valued as a resource in India. Like it's not charged according to what its actual value is. Governments across the board are subsidizing it. I live in Delhi, and Delhi government has subsidized water up to 20,000 liters. There has been a push from the central government. They're trying to provide incentives to the state governments to rationalize the cost of water. But yeah, it's slow right now, and more or less it is going to take time. But yeah, there have been some state governments which have been definitely pushing for solutions like us. So for example, the Karnataka government actually mandated solutions, smart billing system solutions and water level controllers in almost every building. So that has provided us an impetus. Obviously, with every government scheme, there's an element of execution. So we are waiting for that push. And when we talk about more of a smart city or more of a government level deployment, the major challenge that we face over there is essentially that the government is still pretty much stuck up on the older technologies, which are not as efficient as the new technologies that are present in the market right now. their rationale is obviously correct, that those are tried and tested. But so to change that mentality, we're trying to advocate using different consultancies and using different partners in the stream for sure. So yeah, that is something which we hope will change in the future. Yeah.
Thanks, Ganesh. And we have a question from our audience actually, to any of the panelists who would like to sort of tackle this. If they could share their, your criteria to define solutions that result in sustainable urban environments, and what makes these solutions sort of create sustainable cities. I'm not sure which of you would like to sort of address that, but essentially, the criteria, I guess, what constitutes a green solution, or how do you see this impacting urban India?
So I can probably go first, if that's okay.
Sure.
So the way we looked at sustainable urban environments, I think in our context is, I think the pain point is very clear when it comes to a problem like parking, because it's completely chaotic in India. And the fact that you don't have a mechanism to sort of manage on-street parking is in itself a problem. So there's a regulatory problem, obviously. But then you also see that one of the big issues is what you call a free rider problem in parking, because everybody expects that somebody else will solve the problem, but nobody really solves it. And then people think that there's no real incentive. So what we really look at now, when you look at parking as a problem, what is the impact from a sustainability point of view? Obviously, one level, chaotic parking makes for congested cities. It's a very common problem in all the major cities in India. The second order problem is obviously that if people are parking all over the place and then other guys are looking for parking around wherever they're going to go, then they're burning fuel. They're obviously, and the process of burning fuel, they're also giving out a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And that's obviously contributing to more polluted cities. So you clearly have a connection there in terms of what you can do to bring sustainability. Now, the way we looked at our solution is that in a context of cities in countries like India, which are basically developing economy cities, space is going to be a permanent constraint. We are already more densely populated than any other city in the Western world. So creating parking space in itself is not going to be a solution. So what you need to really figure out is how do you efficiently organize the space that's already available and share it between different parties. So you really need a very intelligent system that allows you to sort of do that, and a digital system helps that. The second thing is, obviously, so what you're really trying to do is make parking a shared resource, which is the right way to go about even for developed cities, but it's the only way to go for probably in cities like India, in places like India, and probably in Southeast Asia or Latin America for that matter. So as we figured that out, we said, how do we do that how do we find solutions that make that happen? And really the issues then come to cost and architecture of the solution. And that's where really we spent a lot of time figuring out how we would design our solution to cross those barriers. But because if we can cross those two barriers, for example, we have systems which can run literally at close to zero cost for someone who wants to set up a system. And then we also have systems which are sophisticated, and then you can spend a lot of money on that. So it depends on who's doing that. So that's how we built our solutions, which means any property can deploy this. And once you are connected to our system, then you are also connected to a grid in a city. So we have, say, 100 parking lots in Bangalore. So 100 parking lots are connected to a network, and then we can keep growing that to 1,000 and 10,000. And that then becomes part of the system. So that's really how we looked at what is the problem, how do we need to get to a solution that works, and how do we build our systems and our processes and the products that we want to sell that make that happen. And that's kind of how we connected the sustainability to what we do.
Thanks, Prashant. Amrita or Kanish, any thoughts from either of you?
Sure. So what we are looking at essentially is making water an equitable resource. It should not just be a resource which is targeted towards the high-end colonies, or just available for the high-end colonies. When the supply is less, what we are trying to do is reduce or optimize demand. So essentially, creating the sustainable urban living spaces is only possible when we optimize these resources and make sure that each individual or each citizen does acquire the minimum amount of water that that they need for their basic survival at least. So that is what we're trying to do with our solution, and definitely it is a long-term journey, but yeah, we're on it.
Thanks, Ganesh. Amrita, any thoughts?
Sure. So, at a very macro level, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, there's multiple different goals which address different parts of our urban fabric and our, the living infrastructure and the living conditions around us. From the Smart Cities mission document, because we've done a lot of work, with the mission. So they had identified 16 sort of macro areas of interventions, of which at least 60-65% of them had huge amounts of tech components where technologies and new age technologies could be utilized for bringing in different kinds of sustainability, whether it is in smart sanitation or whether it is in smart water or smart parking or smart mobility and so on, right? This is multiple different areas. So, and each of these areas in some way impacts overall these sustainable development goals. And right now there is other goals as well that have been articulated by Government of India. So there is a Municipal Performance Index. There is other things which are really impacting the quality of life. The latest thing actually from Government of India, which came about 2 years back, which is taking a lot of World Bank reports and other indices from around the world and crafting and recrafting for India, is the Ease of Living Index. So if you think about it, ultimately all of this infrastructure and all of these solutions that we are devising is to improve the quality of life of the citizens. And from the perspective of Gaia, because we are an ops tech company, and you will say, what is sustainable about operations? So I'll give you some examples, right? So we work a lot in sanitation. And if you look at the challenges, in sanitation, you have assets, and the condition of India is extremely harsh. There's a lot of wear and tear. There's a lot of things that go missing out in the field at different locations. You have people and distributed workforces, sometimes your own, sometimes third party. There's a lot of loss of accountability and transparency through the whole system. And all of this leads to losses. And I'll give you an example. Just for within the entire spectrum of smart sanitation spending that Government of India does, this was a report by a Swiss organization on that Government of India spends $40 billion per year just on the operations and maintenance of public toilets and community toilets, right? That's a lot of money, right? And if you look at the last mile infrastructure, there's a lot of it, that doesn't either get delivered or it's missing. So if you stitch together solutions, right, which are AI, IoT, analytics, all of it stitched together, but the whole idea is really to bring that transparency into the ecosystem, to say that, okay, there is spend, but that spend is actually happening. There was service to be delivered, and that service is being delivered, right? And the same thing in railways, the same in everything, and some of the other city-based solutions that we deliver. The whole idea is that if you automate the operations and you digitalize the footprint of that operation through sensors, hardware, software, technology, digital apps, all of it blended together, right? Then you are really enabling sustainability in many, many different ways, right? Because the a long tail of it is immense and impacts many different things. So if you have public infrastructure, there is impact on electricity, there is impact on water, there is an impact on many other things that get interlinked into it. So you have to, if this question was from the, from the lens of trying to find an idea, I think the market is right. And I think you should look at clean green, not just beyond, obviously it is about environment. Obviously, it is about smart utilities and mobility, but really it is a lot broader, and you can find many ideas.
Thanks, Amrita. And unfortunately, we're kind of getting close to the top of the hour. So I would just like to ask Ganesh and Prashant, if you could talk a little bit about your Urban Works Challenge experience. What are really the advantages of being a part of an accelerator like this? Is it mentoring? Is it access to resources? Sort of technical inputs. If you could just share a little bit, about your Urban Works Innovation Challenge experiences.
Sure. So when Agua joined the UrbanWorks Innovation Challenge, we had a product, we had a market, but we didn't know how to get from A to B. Like the structures and the processes were not defined at all. What UrbanWorks Innovation Challenge helped us was mainly by setting up those processes and structures and essentially helping us optimize our existing resources, like creating strategies around them, providing us the right frameworks, providing us the right tools to use. Moreover, obviously, the access to brilliant mentors and brilliant industry connects was essential for us, not only to develop our idea further, but also for expanding our sales portfolio. Yeah, for sure. So definitely, I would advise everyone over here to definitely apply for this program. It's
Thanks. And Prashant, just, briefly your thoughts.
So we were very excited to be part of the program because we had a product that was working in some other segments, but we did not actually at that. One of the interesting things for us is how do we solve for parking in the context of people going to work within a city, and we had not really figured out the solutions at that point. So this program came about the right time when we were looking at it, and we were looking to figure out. So the program really helped us think through the problem, meet a lot of domain experts. We had a very good, interesting opportunity to actually test out our solutions, which we built during that program on the field with some partners. Other than that, you get a wonderful mix of domain experts, potential investors, other entrepreneurs who are solving in this space. And that helps bring a lot of ideas. And also, of course, the networks are very useful well beyond the program as well. So I think it's a terrific program. We were very happy to be part of it.
Thanks, Prashant. And just, before we end, I just had a quick question for all of our panelists. If you could just give, one sort of key piece of advice to, all the sort of budding entrepreneurs in our audience, what would it be? Amrita, would you like to go first?
I think my biggest experience sharing would be upbeat, be positive. Every day is a new day. Go win each day. Even if you have a knock on a particular day, tomorrow is another day. Go out, go for it.
Thanks, Amrita. Prashant or Kanish, would one of you like to go next?
sure. Yeah, I would just like to say that patience pays in this sector. Like this is a sector which does require a lot of grit and hard work. And yeah, if you want to make this work, it has to be mission driven. So yeah.
Thanks, Kanish. And Prashant?
So I would somewhat concur with Kanish in saying that I think patience and perseverance is definitely very critical. I think the other thing is obviously that you should be truly passionate about solving the problem that you're chasing here, because then you're more likely to find a solution, because a lot of this is very white space in terms of completely new ideas having to be created. So you have two challenges. One is you are trying to build a business, but you're often also trying to create an ecosystem or help shape an ecosystem. And that's a slightly bigger, more macro sort of issue in a space like this. So passion will really take you a long way in getting to the right sort of outcome.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. You've been fantastic, Amrita, Kanish, and Prashant. Your candid sharing and valuable insights. I'm sure all the entrepreneurs in the audience, are surely going to benefit greatly from all of that. So thank you. And with that, I'd like to now hand it back to the Columbia Global Centers team.
So that concludes today's launch event. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. It was really an engaging session, and thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for being here, and thank you, for those inspiring words.